Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet has approved on Thursday an unilateral ceasefire to halt 11 days military operations in the Gaza Strip. Syrians residents all over the world vote in their embassies and consulates for next week's presidential election. After 23 days of social mobilizations in rejections of Ivan Duque's neoliberal policies, new repressive actions were registered this Wednesday in several cities of Colombia. Hello, welcome to From the South. I am Janet Perez Moya from the TeleSUR studios in La Habana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet approved on Thursday a ceasefire to halt the 11-day military operation in the occupied Gaza Strip. The decision followed international pressure to halt the offensive. Israel and Hamas, the Palestinian resistance movement, will enter a mutual and simultaneous ceasefires at 2 a.m. on Friday. Netanyahu's office said in a statement that Israel's security cabinet had agreed to accept an Egyptian proposal for a mutual ceasefire without any preconditions. Meanwhile, far-right Israeli lawmakers, including some of Netanyahu's closest political allies, warned him against a ceasefire agreement with Hamas resistance. At least 230 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli airstrikes on Gaza Strip over the past 11 days, according to Gaza health officials. In the early hours of Thursday, Israel carried out more than a dozen airstrikes on Gaza, including two that destroyed two houses in the territory's south. Rocket attacks on Israel stopped for 8 hours on Thursday, the 11th day of hostilities before resuming against communities near the Israel-Gaza border. Medics say 4 people were wounded in the airstrike on the town of Han Younis in southern Gaza. Since the fighting began on 10 May, Palestinian health officials say 228 people have been killed in aerial bombardments that have worsened Gaza's already hard humanitarian situation. Nearly 450 buildings in Gaza have been destroyed or damaged, including 6 hospitals and 9 primary care health centers, the United Nations Humanitarian Agency has said. More than 52,000 people have fled their homes in Gaza, which is blockaded by Israel. This Thursday, the United Nations General Assembly met to discuss the violent situation in Palestine, while Israel continued with its attacks against the population with a death toll of more than 100 people. The meeting was requested by Niger and Algeria chairs of the Organization for Islamic Cooperation Group in light of the gravity of the situation and its rapid deteriorations. In a letter sent to the Assembly President Volkan Bozkır, both countries expressed deep regret over the serious deterioration of the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, including its Jerusalem, due to Israel's illegal policies and practice. They also say that Israeli military aggressions against the Palestinian civilian population have caused the loss of hundreds of innocent lives, great suffering, and threaten international peace and stability.
China will continue that the Council cannot remain silent.
As part of the United Nations General Assembly meeting to discuss the rapid deterioration of the situation in the Gaza Strip, Secretary General Antonio Gutteres called for an immediate stop to the violence and urged both parties to find common grounds in order to prevent more innocent death.
The fighting must stop immediately. I appeal to all parties to cease hostilities now, and I reiterate my call on all sides for an immediate ceasefire. The hostilities have caused serious damage to vital civilian infrastructure in Gaza, including roads and electricity lines, contributing to a humanitarian emergency.
This Thursday, more than 100 demonstrators rallied in Pakistani's southern city of Karachi to demand an immediate end to Israel airstrikes in Gaza. The demonstration in Karachi came ahead of nationwide rallies due to take place on Friday in support of the Palestinian people. Protesters chanted anti-Israeli and pro-Palestinian slogans as they marched on the streets. The protests took place as Pakistan's Foreign Minister Haq Mahmood fled to New York to address the United Nations General Assembly meeting, which discussed the gravity of the situation and its rapid deterioration in the last few days.
It's like a long struggle, years of and decades of resistance, but now I think it's the right time to speak against Israel. Or the media blockade and so many other things have been happening, and it's about time that we all should gather, come out on the roads and demand justice for our Palestinian brothers and sisters.
Thousands of demonstrators marched in the capital of Mauritania to denounce the aggression perpetrated against the Palestinian people by Israel, a protest organized at a call of the government and opposition parties and society organizations. The march took place without incidents from the city center to the headquarters of the United Nations Development Program in the Mauritanian. In the text delivered to the UNDP officials in Nouakchott at the end of the march, the organizers urged the UN to assume responsibilities in the face of this massacre of children, women, and the elderly and punish Israeli criminals. As part of the international community support, France presented a draft resolution to members of the United Nations Security Council calling for a ceasefire between Israel and Gaza. French President Emmanuel Macron's office publicly announced their position on this, following a meeting with his Egyptian counterpart, who is currently visiting Paris, and Jordan's King Abdullah II, who joined it via video conference. In addition to demanding an immediate end to the violence, the core of the resolution's text stressed the urgent need for humanitarian assistance to Gaza. The French move surprised the United States, which has 3 times in the past week blocked joint statements with similar messages, insisting that such measures will not help advance a ceasefire. We will now go to a short break. Follow us on Twitter at TeleSUR English and Perez Moya TeleSUR for more news. Welcome back. This Thursday, Syrian residents all over the world vote in their embassies and consulates for next week's presidential elections. In the capital, Damascus, there are more than 1,000 polling stations set up in every part of the city. These presidential elections will be held in 2 phases. The first on May 20 for citizens living abroad, on the second on May 26 for those who reside in the country. Local media showed hundreds of Syrians lining up to vote at the polling stations set in Syrian embassies in Lebanon, Australia, Russia, among other countries. In the meantime, Syria's deputy foreign minister denounced that some countries, such as Turkey and Germany, denied Syrians residents in their territory to constitutional rights and stated that these decisions continue at a violation of international law. United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov, the first high-level encounter between the United States and Russia since President Joe Biden took office. The discussion, which took place during the Arctic Council Ministerial in Iceland, touched on a wide range of issues underlying the tense relationship between Washington and Moscow. On the first in-person meeting, both administrations acknowledged that despite having serious difference in how they view world affairs, they agreed that both sides can still find ways to work together. Secretary Blinken highlighted that Russia and the United States have many areas of interest, including the COVID-19 pandemic and climate change. On the other hand, Russian Foreign Minister said that the talks were honest, factual, and with mutual respect.
The conversations appear constructive to me. There is an understanding of the need to overcome the unhealthy ties between Moscow and Washington in recent years. There are a lot of logjams in the two countries' ties, and working through them is not easy, but I sense the determination of Antony Blinken and his team to do it. We will not be found wanting. We've agreed to continue our joint actions, which are developing rather successfully, on regional conflicts where US and Russian interests overlap.
In the meantime, the 8 countries bordering the Arctic met in Iceland to discuss peaceful cooperation in the region, accelerated global warming, untapped resources, and new maritime routes opened up by a retreating sea ice, as well as the future of local populations, were among the main issues in the agenda for the foreign ministers. With the departure of former U.S. President Donald Trump, all eyes will now be on the line adopted by Joe Biden administration. Meanwhile, Russia is set to success Iceland as the rotating chair in the Arctic Council, a body which aims to foster talks at the time of increased military maneuvers in the region. Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov said that the Arctic should remain an area of peace, stability, and international cooperation, and he spoke at the end of the Arctic Council ministerial meeting in Iceland.
We believe that the Arctic should remain the territory of peace, stability, and constructive cooperation. And today we have highlighted again at the meeting that we see no grounds for conflict here, even more so for any development of military programs of some blocs here. And we are satisfied to note that most of our partners agree with us on this, and we are convinced that only full partnership can ensure the prosperity of the region.
Trump and his family faced criminal charge on Wednesday after New York State's prosecutor said it was working with Manhattan investigators in its proof into the former president's business dealing. The Office of New York State Attorney General announced late Tuesday it was investigating the Trump Organization in a criminal capacity. The Trump Organization is the holding company for hundreds of Trump's entities, ranging from hotels to golf courses. Previously, it was said that in proof to possible tax, insurance, and bank fraud was through civil proceedings, which do not carry the threats of an indictment or imprisonment. On Thursday, the European Space Agency confirmed that the biggest iceberg in the world has broken loose from an ice shelf in Antarctica. The huge floating iceberg is close to 80 times the size of Manhattan and slightly larger than the Spanish island of Majorca. Iceberg calving is part of the natural cycle, with large pieces of ice breaking off the ice shelf on regular intervals. Scientists are not attributing the particular breakoff to climate change and instead believe it's part of a natural cycle known as calving. Once it melts, the new iceberg will not lead to a sea level rise because it was part of a floating ice shelf. According to the European Space Agency, the piece of ice is now officially known as the A76. Several Greek villages were evacuated Thursday with no injuries reported as firefighters battle the country's first major blaze of the year, this on a mountain range overlooking the Gulf of Corinth. 6 villages and 2 monasteries were evacuated after the fire broke out on Wednesday evening. Residents say they barely had time to dress as they were evacuated. Fire department chief said reinforcement has been rushed in around the country to contain the blaze, and local officials say the fire had a front 10 kilometers wide. The blaze rushed overnight around the protected wildlife habitat of Mount Geranaya. Fire department chief said he believed the fire could be brought under control during the course of the day. However, the local mayor said there was still concerns should the wind switch directions. According to several reports, below once clouds of smoke were visible in the capital. This Thursday, Regional Director for Africa at the World Health Organization, Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, warned that time is running out for African countries to close the gap of vaccines inequality, noting to fewer than 2% of people on the continent have received a COVID-19 vaccine jab, compared to 80% in high-income nations.
So when we look at access to the vaccines, we see great inequalities across countries. Seychelles is one of the most vaccinated countries in the world, with 67% of the population having received at least 1 dose. In Morocco, they've reached 21.9%, and in Mauritius, 17%. Whereas in 14 African countries, less than 1% of the population has received a single dose, and in 4 countries, vaccination hasn't started at all. COVID-19 vaccine shipments to African countries have slowed down to a trickle this month because of the reliance on India as one of the key manufacturers globally and the devastating surge of cases that that country is dealing with. The continent was expecting 66 million doses through COVAX from February to May, but instead has so far received only 18.2 million.
Mexico received a new batch of 585,000 vaccines of Pfizer-BioNTech against the coronavirus this Wednesday. The shipment was the 51st to arrive in the country, which has now received over 12.6 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine. Another batch of 585,000 doses is due to arrive on Thursday, and a further 114,000 doses on Friday. According to President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, today Mexico has acquired a total of more than 30.2 million doses of different COVID-19 vaccines. More news in a minute. Join us after this. Welcome back. After 23 days of social mobilizations in rejection of Iván Duque's neoliberal policies, new repressive actions were registered this Wednesday in several cities of Colombia. According to representatives of human rights organizations on Wednesday night, officers of the mobile anti-riot squad violently repressed protesters in a front of hospital the city of Popayán in the department of Cauca, affecting patients and medical personnel of the healthcare center. During the news day repression in the city of Bucaramanga, Santander, students of the Industrial University request the creation of a humanitarian corridor for the transfer to the wounded. The demonstrators assured that on Wednesday night, 2 tanks of the National Police broke into the university campus. In the Colombian capital, they also report attacks by the law enforcement agents against civilians who were protesting at the station portal de las Américas. Violent actions by police forces were also reported in the city of Pasto, Nariño. The city of Medellin was another locally where actions of repression were reported, leaving dozens of people injured.
Ojo, el pueblo quería dialogar.
In Colombia, due to popular pressure, the health system reform bill promoting the further commercialization of healthcare in the country was archived this Wednesday by a large majority in the Senate and House of Representatives committees in charge of its discussion. The controversial bill, introduced by the Radical Change Party on July 20 and supported by Iván Duque's government, was discarded with 16 votes in favor and 3 against, in response to the widespread rejections of the move as seen on the streets of Colombia's main cities for the past 22 days. The neoliberal bill proposed the complete privatization of the health system, the creation of sectors conglomerates, the closure of public hospitals, as well as mechanism for the denial of service and medical treatment to the most vulnerable sectors of the population. Likewise, it left decisions regarding whether to fund medical treatments or not to the Finance Ministry. Since the beginning of the protests in Colombia on April 28, more than 2,800 cases of police violence have been reported in the country. According to the NGO Temblores that monitors the police brutality cases in the country, between April 28 and May 17, 384 Colombians have been victims of direct law enforcement violence during the demonstrations and 146 gunshot wounded. Also, the organization reports 43 murders perpetrated by public force and 1,139 arbitrary detentions. 33 protesters have eye injuries due to the frequent police shooting at demonstrators' faces. Temblores also reports 21 women have been sexually assaulted and 6 people suffer gender-based violence. On Thursday, former Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva confirmed for the first time that he intends to be a candidate in the 2022 elections. Lula da Silva chose the French weekly news magazine Paris Match to announce his candidacy for the presidential elections. He made this announcement after 19 months in prisons and long illegal brutality. Meanwhile, Brazil, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused more than 400,000 deaths on the value of the local currency. Real was fallen in 14% in 2020. The leader of the Workers' Party said during his interview that he fully intends to get Brazil out of the crisis worsened by the pandemic and the unpopular policies of Jair Bolsonaro. Lula also mentioned that during his presidency, he developed strong ties with Europe, South America, China, and Russia. Brazilian Environment Minister Ricardo Salles has been suspended from his duties as the Supreme Court authorized a search of his home as part of investigation into illegal timber export. The police operation was authorized by Supreme Court Judge Alexander de Moraes, who also authorized federal police access to Salles' bank records, as well as the immediate suspension of a decree issued in February 2020 that regularized more than 8,000 shipments of illegally exported timber between 2019 and 2020. He also ordered the removal of 10 people from positions of trust in the ministry and the environmental regulatory body, including its president, Eduardo Bin. Salles has been criticized by indigenous and environmental organizations for his harmful environmental policies, which has led to increased deforestation. El Salvador's Parliament Constitutional Commission on Wednesday decided to shelve a bill to decriminalize abortion in special cases. Formed mostly by representatives of the ruling News Ideas Party, the Constitutional Commission argued that other bills were more important. In El Salvador, women who have an abortion are charged with aggravated homicide, which implies penalties from 30 to 50 years in prison. In October 2016, the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front and human rights organizations proposed Congress to modify Article 133 of the Penal Code to decriminalize abortion. The bill proposed the legalization of abortion when the purpose of the medical intervention is to save the woman's life and the pregnancy is the result of rape, the fetus had a malformation, or a teenager was raped. The Constitutional Commission also rejected bills related to criminalization of nepotism and protection of journalists and human rights defenders. Messy registration of presidential primaries in Chile on Wednesday. Changing accusations, center-left parties failed to agree on a common primary, and communist candidate Daniel Jadue now leads opinion polls for the top job. General elections are due in November. May 19 was the last day for political parties to sign up the presidential pre-candidates for the primary elections on July 18. The current senator and Christian Democratic Party candidate Jimena Rincon resigned after being asked by the head of her party to do so. The Party for Democracy also withdrew his candidate Heraldo Muñoz and decided to support the Socialist Party's candidate Paula Narváez, a former minister during Michelle Bachelet's government, and cast by the former Chilean president for the Socialist Party's candidacy, also has the support of the Liberal Party and the New Deal organization, as candidate Pablo Vidal resigned as well. This traditional right-wing or center-left political force that lost massively include the Socialist Party, the Party for Democracy, and the Liberal Party, which pursued an alliance with these actions. On the other hand, Chile's Communist Party is emerging as one of the most potent political organizations ahead of the presidential elections, alongside the Broad Front. According to the latest poll on Wednesday by Pulso Ciudadano, the candidates and Recoleta municipality Mayor Daniel Jadue leads public preference, followed by right-wing candidate Joaquin Levin. We have come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. For TeleSUR English, I am Janet Perez Moya. Thank you for watching.